It's now time for the Weekly with News 6 morning anchor Justin Warmoth.
This is the Weekly on ClickOrlando.com with Justin Warmoth.
Good morning, I'm Justin Warmoth. Brevard County Sheriff Wayne Ivey was first elected in 2012, and after running unopposed in 2016, this year he has a challenger. Alton Edmond, a criminal defense attorney, told me this week the sheriff's office needs change, and despite his lack of law enforcement experience, he believes he's the right person for the job. Let's get into it. Tell the viewers about your background and why you're running for sheriff of Brevard County.
Well, I can remember growing up down in Clewiston, Florida, in a neighborhood called Harlem that was overwhelmingly minority. And at 9 years old, I remember my mom getting a job at the Hendry County Sheriff's Department, and my views on law enforcement at that time began to change. Because as a very young person, I experienced what many people unfortunately experience around the nation. The only time I saw law enforcement in my neighborhood was when they were coming in to make an arrest or coming in to take away someone that I knew or cared about. It wasn't until my mom put on that uniform that my views began to change in a positive direction. And I began to see my mom really show me what community policing was. As she worked for the Hendry County Sheriff's Department in the Traffic Safety Division, it was her that made sure that my cohorts and I were safe every morning as we got onto the school bus. It was her there every afternoon, making sure that we got home safely. It was her that got kids from the neighborhood to go to the nursing home and sing to the elderly and the sick. And it was her that really instilled in me the idea that law enforcement are in place for more than just arresting people, but they're in place to make people feel safe and make communities better. And as I went forward into my career as an attorney, I worked for the prosecutor's office in Orange County. I've worked for the public defender's office in Orange County, as well as the public defender's office in Brevard County. I've worked for several small law practices on the road to getting here. A solo practitioner, business owner, multiple business owner, and attorney running for Brevard County Sheriff.
Mm-hmm. You know, your time as a public defender in Brevard County ended on a note that seems to be a little confusing depending on who you ask. So you were fired, right, for wearing a Black Lives Matter tie? Is that what happened?
I was fired for wearing the tie and then posting a Facebook status about not being able to wear my tie or feeling as if I was discriminated against. So I was fired retaliation for speaking out against the discrimination that I felt that was associated with the tie. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't fired directly for wearing the tie.
Okay. Yeah, the public defender also said that there was a loaded gun left on your office desk. What's the story there?
Absolutely. I came to work. I was getting ready to go to court, and I can't take my gun to court. I have a license to carry it concealed. I put it on my desk. That was not a shared space. It was my personal space in the office. I put it on my desk. I closed the door to my office. The door wasn't a glass door, so you can't see inside. And I didn't authorize anyone to go in there, but someone went into my office while I was in court, and they discovered my weapon on my desk in my office, which door was closed when I went to court. And so that's what happened.
Okay.
They've been twisting that story to make it seem, and my former boss specifically has been twisting that story to make it seem as if I just left a loaded firearm in some public space where anyone could have picked it up. Mm-hmm. And of course, that's not true. In order to get to this, you would have had to have been an employee or escorted by an employee because we had badges to buzz us into the office. And not only that, but in order to get into my office, you would have had to open my door and cross into my private office space, which is what that person did. And that's why my firearm was discovered.
Got it. Your platform, what would you say are the key points to your platform, and what do you think you would do if elected? What would be your first step?
The key points of my platform is really a community policing model that puts special emphasis on accountability, civility, and transparency. Now, when we talk about accountability, there's both internal accountability as sheriff and external accountability. Internal accountability is being accountable for the people that work under your command, being accountable for the people in your office. And it's important to me to make sure we do everything we can to create a safe environment that optimizes the work of the law enforcement officers in Brevard County. My brother served in the military as a Marine, and he's seen battle. He's a combat veteran. And when I think about the different services that are in place for him, when I think about how he has access to resources to be able to deal with the things that he's seen and the things that he's been a part of, that's something that our law enforcement officers should have access to. They should have those resources, because I can imagine that many law enforcement officers deal with PTSD and mental health conditions as a result of the very high stress work in which they put their lives on the line. So internal accountability is really about making sure that they're taken care of. And, recently, we've gotten word, my team and different people in the community have been buzzing because at Brevard County Sheriff's Office, apparently dozens of people have quit just recently within the last 30 days or so. And so it's clear that for whatever reason, they don't feel as if, BCSO is a place for them to thrive and grow anymore. And so that's one thing that's really important for me, making sure that my people are taken care of. The external accountability is really about being accountable to the community. And so as a public figure, it's important to understand who you answer to and who your bosses are. And those bosses are the taxpayers of Brevard County. And for whatever reason, our current sheriff has lost track of that, and has somewhat. Some would say he's gotten too big for his britches. I won't postulate, but as it relates to accountability, it's important for me to make sure that when deputies are doing well, that they're well taken care of. But when they do things that put the community at risk, such as we saw on May 25th, as it related to George Floyd, we need to see accountability for those deputies. And there's been a history in Brevard County. There are documented cases of police misconduct in which deputies got a slap on the wrist. We had deputies involved in domestic violence situations with wives, and nothing seemed to happen. They kept their jobs. But as you know, domestic violence battery in the state of Florida, if you're convicted of it, your right to carry a firearm in the state of Florida can be revoked for life. And so, whereas a police officer committed that crime and abused their spouse, they were able to not only keep their right to carry a firearm, but to still be able to use that firearm and the badge to, I guess, protect and serve when in fact their home isn't even safe for their spouse. And so things like that are important because the community needs to be confident that their sheriff is working to keep them safe and to hold even the police accountable when they put the community at risk.
Coming up, Edmond will discuss the controversial case of Gregory Edwards, a former Marine who died after a confrontation with Brevard County corrections officers. Stay with us.
This is The Weekly on ClickOrlando.com with Justin Warmoth.
Welcome back. Our guest this morning is candidate for Brevard County Sheriff Alton Edmond, the criminal defense attorney challenging Sheriff Wayne Ivey, saying he's running because the public is losing trust in the sheriff's office. A big reason for that, according to Edmond, is how Ivey has handled the 2018 case of Gregory Edwards, who died at the Brevard County Jail after a confrontation with corrections officers.
FDLE found that the corrections officers were justified with their use of force that ultimately led to his death. What would you like to see happen? And if you're elected, will that video be released? And what will happen as far as an investigation is concerned, furthering more details into that case?
As sheriff, I will release the Gregory Edwards video. It is high time. It is a matter of public importance. It is a matter of public record, and the excuse that the sheriff has given, jail security, is not a valid one. because, the sheriff has made shows inside of the jail showing the inner workings of the jail. So security isn't an issue when it comes to entertainment purposes, but for whatever reason, security is an issue when it comes to freedom of the press and public records. That makes no sense. It's clear that there's a conflict there. And now the refusal to release that public record is costing taxpayers money, because now there's a lawsuit for the release of that record. And the taxpayers are paying for that lawsuit when the video should have been released all along, because it's a public record of public importance, great public importance. But for whatever reason, the sheriff is fighting to keep or to conceal details of an investigation that's supposedly favorable. If his deputies did nothing wrong, then why would you conceal the video? It stinks to a lot of people that have been following this story. And the simple question is, if you have nothing to hide, then release the video. And it's clear that our sheriff has something to hide. When we look at how that situation was handled, the reports are that that a deputy was assaulted or injured trying to keep Gregory under control. And so 6 other deputies got involved, and they punched him, they kneed him, they elbowed him, they tased him, and then they put a spit hood on him and strapped him to a chair and left him to die. The details of what happened to him are very graphic details. And, honestly, it would outrage me whether it was a black man, a white man, or whoever, because, people deserve better than this. That's not how you treat a human being. But especially when someone is a combat military veteran whose job was to save lives as a medic. And that person is the person who you beat mercilessly as he's dealing with a PTSD episode. And then that's the person whose organs were confiscated. So it's more than just a video, but Gregory Edwards' organs were confiscated, and they're being held by the sheriff as evidence, or they've been destroyed. We don't know. The widow, Holly Edwards, requested them and never received them. She actually brought in an independent doctor to perform an independent autopsy, and that doctor was not able to perform the procedure because Gregory Edwards' brain and, I believe, kidney were removed from his body. And so when you talk about concealment of evidence, when you talk about cover up, this is textbook. Can you imagine a military veteran and his family not being able to lay his body to rest truly because the sheriff refuses to release even his organs, let alone the video of the last moments of his life? It's heart-wrenching to imagine what the families must be going through. And that's why I've done what I can to try to support the family when possible, because my brother is a Marine, and I can't imagine what I would do if something like this were to happen to him down in Polk County where he lives.
A phrase that we've seen certainly over the last few months would be defund the police. People have different thoughts and viewpoints on what that exactly means. How do you view that phrase, defund the police?
So, I see it 2 ways. I think defund the police in some environments means just taking away money from law enforcement and putting that money elsewhere. And another, meaning is restructuring law enforcement budgets to provide funding for things that law enforcement is not best equipped to do, and that someone else should probably be doing. And I see the value in the second one. I don't necessarily support defunding the police, but I support, funding programs that make the community safer. And I support funding programs that better equip our officers to do a good job and to keep people safe. And so as long as the funds are used in a way that make the community safer and that better equip officers to do their job, then I'm willing to fund them, whatever programs they may be, however unorthodox.
Your critics and probably your opponent would point to the lack of law enforcement experience in running an organization as large as the Brevard County Sheriff's Office, and they would point to that and say that you're not qualified. What do you think makes you qualified to run an organization of that stature without any law enforcement experience?
I laugh. I laugh sometimes when I hear people, especially my opponent, push that particular narrative, because he's the probably number one supporter for our president, who is currently in the highest political office in the world, and who is commander-in-chief of the largest military in the world. But he has never been a public figure and has never served in the military. But our sheriff is one of the most outspoken proponents for him to be president. If people can vote for a president to an office in which he has absolutely no experience, then certainly those same people should consider a sheriff that is an expert in the study of the law. I am not completely foreign to law and law enforcement. I've worked at the prosecutor's office and helped to ensure that criminals were held accountable. I've also gotten an opportunity to see the other side of the system and the way that it works. And so when you look at my experience and you look at the fact that I have not only a bachelor's degree in criminal justice, but that I have a doctorate degree in the study of law, when you consider the fact that I've worked alongside prosecutors, when you consider the fact that I have dealt with criminal defendants on that level, when you consider the fact that I am a business owner that runs 2 successful businesses, and when you consider all of those things together, along with the fact that I am a very active community advocate and someone that has been outspoken in defending education and human rights here in Brevard County, it's unquestionable who the vote should go to. Because within Brevard County Sheriff's Office, there are 1,600 people with law enforcement experience that as sheriff, I would have the ability to rely upon their expertise. And so adding another one to the top does not necessarily give the Brevard County Sheriff's Office any credence, but to add someone to the top of Brevard County Sheriff's Office with my expertise, with my background, with my overall understanding of the community and the system itself, someone with such a love for the community of Brevard, someone with family that's been in Brevard County for generations, it's no question who the vote should go to. And that's why I'm qualified to be the next sheriff of Brevard County, Florida.
And my thanks to Alton Edmond for the time this week. By the way, early voting in Brevard County begins Monday, October 18th. As always, for the latest information on the upcoming election, just head to clickorlando.com/results2020. I'm Justin Warmoth. Hope you have a great Sunday.